Move over healthcare, there's a new racket in America, and it's coming for your power bills. The cost of guaranteeing electricity in 13 American states has exploded from $29 to $330 per megawatt day, an 830% increase in just 2 years. And no prizes for guessing who's responsible. The data center boom has taken America's AI energy crisis from forecast to invoice in record time. So today, we find out just how bad it is, why, and what it means for the markets. My name is Guy, and this is Coin Bureau Finance. Before we begin though, nothing in this video is financial advice. We're just breaking down what the AI energy crisis is, who will be paying for it, and who stands to profit. If you find our videos useful, smash that like button and let's dig in. So, an AI-induced energy crisis has been on the cards for years. Now it's very much here, and the sight of Silicon Valley exhausting America's power grid, scrambling to suck a few more gigawatts from dead nuclear plants, and planning to launch data centers in space has more or less silenced the optimists. In the optimistic scenario, AI's power consumption was supposed to be kept in check by Moore's law. If you're not familiar, this was the observation by Intel co-founder Gordon Moore that the number of transistors on microchips doubles every 2 years. It's not a law of nature, but an industrial phenomenon that predicts a constant advance of computing technology, which becomes faster, more energy efficient, and cheaper over time. The problem is that AI compute demand is doubling every 6 months. Efficiency gains are but a speck on the windshield of AI's power consumption curve at this point. Now, a massive driver of this demand is the fundamental change in what large language models actually do now. What used to pass for artificial intelligence was really just an overpowered autocomplete. Early LLMs predicted the next word in a sequence, spat it out, and moved on. They were reasonably fast, relatively cheap, and frequently wrong. You would count your lucky stars if you could talk to ChatGPT for more than 15 minutes without it making stuff up or losing the plot. But hundreds of billions of dollars in capex and many gigawatt hours later, the leading models of early 2026, like Google's Gemini 3 Pro and OpenAI's ChatGPT-5, have mutated. They've gained powerful new capabilities, the most important of which are reasoning modules and hidden chains of thought that span thousands of internal steps. Under the hood, they check their own logic and backtrack when something doesn't add up, and simulate different outcomes before producing a single visible token. And late last year, researchers at Microsoft revealed how much this costs to run. They say a standard query costs around 0.34 watt-hours, whereas a reasoning task burns through 4.32 watt-hours. So while the conversation-style interface hasn't really changed, the thing you're conversing with has transformed from a simple chatbot into a reasoning engine that consumes 13 times as much power to reply to you. But don't feel bad about making the most powerful model available think as hard as possible about how to answer your work emails, because it's not you draining the power grid. Nor is it the cumulative strain of millions of people asking ChatGPT to write birthday messages. And come to think of it, it's not even coming from people. The real power hogs are AI agents in enterprise deployments. These are custom-built systems where agents run autonomously 24/7 at machine speed. Think of financial algorithms reconciling ledgers overnight or supply chain agents rerouting global logistics in real time. So, whereas a retail user might prompt ChatGPT a few times a day, an enterprise agent runs thousands of reasoning chains per hour indefinitely. No sleep, no breaks, no days off. And that is what's breaking the existing models for utilities planning. You see, power grids are designed around peaky loads, offices that go dark at 5 p.m, air conditioning that spikes in August. Utilities balance supply against these predictable rhythms. But an AI data center running agentic workloads has no rhythm. It operates at near peak utilization, flat out around the clock. So, to a grid operator, it looks less like a warehouse full of computers and more like an aluminium smelter demanding what the industry calls firm power. That is, electricity that cannot blink, dip, or fade. And instead of Moore's law saving us, AI has triggered the Jevons paradox. When a resource becomes more efficient to use, intuition suggests that people will consume less of it. So if a car becomes more fuel efficient, you'll end up using less fuel to go the same distance because, duh, that's what efficiency means. However, Jevons paradox is when the net effect is the exact opposite. Efficiency gains leading to an explosion of demand. Hyperscalers like OpenAI and Google are locked in an existential capex war of attrition, subsidizing the cost of AI to capture market share and stay relevant. None of them dare charge what it costs to run, let alone what it would cost to turn a profit. Their competition, and heavy subsidies, have made intelligence, or something like it, artificially cheap and abundant. For the rest of the global economy, this has made it profitable to run AI continuously on everything. But no power grid was ever built to handle that. Now, if you want to see what happens when AI demand meets aging infrastructure, look no further than PJM interconnection. PJM operates the US electricity grid for 65 million people across 13 states, from Virginia to Illinois. It's the largest wholesale electricity market in the world, and it's also where America's data center industry is most concentrated. Power grids get their power from power plants, and they don't just pay for electricity as it's generated. They also run capacity markets, essentially paying the plants a premium to guarantee supply when demand spikes. This works like an auction for insurance against blackouts, where the insurers bid to provide the backstop capacity. PJM holds these auctions to secure power 3 years in advance, and the clearing price tells you how tight the energy market is. In 2024, the price to secure that capacity was $28.92 per megawatt-day. Tight, but manageable. Then the auction for the 2025 delivery year jumped to $269. And the latest auction, finalized in December 2025 for the 2027 delivery year, hit the federal regulatory cap, $333.44 per megawatt-day. That's an 833% increase in the cost of grid reliability in just 2 years. PJM's load forecast spiked by 5,250 megawatts in a single year, equivalent to 5 nuclear reactors worth of new demand materializing on paper. And you don't need me to tell you what happened here. PJM explicitly attributed 97% of that growth to data centers. The US electricity grid is now officially short. PJM's filings show a 6,600 megawatt gap between projected demand and available supply, a shortfall roughly equivalent to the entire peak electricity demand of the Republic of Ireland. Now, for America's industrial heartland, this means operating without a safety net. And meanwhile, for the consumer, it's an inflation bomb, because you'd better believe those capacity costs aren't going to be contained to PJM spreadsheets. They flow directly into monthly electricity bills for households across 13 states. So, if you're getting your electricity via PJM, maybe consider asking ChatGPT to have a good hard think about how you can cut down your utility bills. For investors, though, it's another wealth transfer to grab a slice of. In this case, billions are changing hands from ratepayers to the owners of reliable power, companies like Vistra and Constellation Energy, who are now being paid crisis-level premiums just to keep their plants running. And by the way, if you want to understand more about these kinds of macro dynamics, we put together a weekly newsletter breaking down the biggest stories in global finance. We've also got some exclusive finance-related deals for viewers of this channel. So if you're interested, you can sign up using the link in the description or this QR code right over here. Now, some regulators have started to notice that big tech is treating the electrical grid like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they're not thrilled about it. First on their list of complaints was the so-called phantom queue. For years, data center developers were reserving enormous blocks of grid capacity speculatively, in effect locking up gigawatts to block competitors or hedge against future growth that might never materialize. It got so bad that actual power plants couldn't connect to the grid because it was clogged up by paper projects. The state of Ohio was first to put its foot down. In mid-2025, the Public Utilities Commission approved a landmark tariff for American Electric Power, Ohio. The new rule says large data centers must now pay for 85% of their reserved capacity, whether they use the power or not. You book the electrons, you pay for the electrons. This take-or-pay model wipes out the economics of speculative hoarding overnight. Virginia followed with a different approach. Dominion Energy created a new rate class called GS5 specifically for high-load data centers. It's designed to silo the industry to make sure residential customers aren't subsidizing Google's servers through their monthly bills. At long last, your grandma's heating costs and Meta's AI training now live in separate accounting buckets. Next, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission entered the ring and made a beeline for Silicon Valley's favorite loophole, namely co-location. This means plugging data centers directly into power plants to bypass the grid. And Amazon made this one famous when it tried to tap directly into Talon Energy's Susquehanna nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. Jeff Bezos thought he was about to get cheap, dedicated power with the public grid serving as free backup whenever the reactor went down for maintenance. The FERC, though, rejected that specific deal back in late 2024. But in December 2025, the regulator went further, ordering PJM to standardize rules for all co-location arrangements. So, co-location isn't banned, it's just priced now. The new framework says if you want the grid as your backup, you pay grid rates. This was a big step towards closing the era of socialized risk and privatized electricity, and something investors will be paying attention to. For the last decade, big tech treated energy as a cheap commodity subsidized by ratepayers and backstopped by public infrastructure. Now they've sent demand through the roof and stretched the grid to its limits. That model's days are numbered. Energy is becoming a real line item, and AI margins will contract to reflect it. So, the loopholes are closing and the subsidies are drying up. Meanwhile, data centers are multiplying. If big tech can't freeload off the grid anymore, where is the energy going to come from? And what does it cost when you're paying full price? Well, if you're a hyperscaler with an insatiable appetite for round-the-clock reliability, the menu is shorter than you might think. Nuclear has proven a popular answer, and also the slowest. Microsoft's deal to restart 3 Mile Island made headlines in 2024, and the timeline has since accelerated to a targeted restart in 2027. That's still nearly 2 years away for a plant that already exists. Market analysis suggests Microsoft will be paying upwards of $110 per megawatt hour for that power, roughly double the standard wholesale rate. They're paying that premium because nuclear provides the one thing wind and solar cannot: firm, carbon-free baseload that doesn't depend on particular weather conditions. For investors, the nuclear trade has bifurcated. On one side, you've got your atoms in production, companies like Constellation Energy and Vistra that own operating reactors today and are collecting crisis-level premiums to keep them online. On the other side, you've got what have been dubbed PowerPoint reactors. Now, these are your small modular reactor developers like Oklo and NuScale. They have exciting technology and impressive partnerships with Google and Amazon. So far, though, their reactors exist only in slides and feasibility studies, with no revenue-generating electrons hitting the grid until 2030 at the earliest. And for a macro investor, the difference between cash flow today and maybe cash flow in 5 years is quite a big one. And then there's the fuel side of things. 40% of the world's uranium supply is controlled by Kazatomprom, the Kazakh state miner. They recently shocked the market by cutting 2026 production guidance by 10%, citing shortages of sulfuric acid, a critical processing chemical. The uranium market is now in a structural deficit of roughly 14 million kilograms per year. The world is burning a lot more than it's mining, bridging the gap with dwindling Cold War-era stockpiles. Sounds like the textbook setup for a commodity supercycle, if you ask me. For the time being, though, the marginal electron powering AI is most likely coming from a gas turbine. Nuclear takes a decade to build. Gas plants take 3 years. Utilities across the South and Midwest United States are delaying coal retirements and fast-tracking natural gas peaker plants because they're the only assets that can be deployed fast enough. Gas turbine manufacturer GE Vernova's order book is sold out through 2029. The clean energy transition has been put on ice as America transitions to building every new energy source it can as fast as it can, hydrocarbons very much included. And finally, there's what happens when the power actually reaches the building. Just 2 years ago, standard GPU rack densities for high-end AI workloads sat around 10 to 20 kilowatts for hyperscalers running NVIDIA Hopper architecture. But for the new generation Blackwell clusters, this has exploded to 60 to 120 kilowatts per rack and up to 140 kilowatts for Blackwell Ultra architecture. This means there's so much heat being radiated that air cooling mechanisms don't stand a chance. It's like trying to put out a house fire by blowing on it. Not going to happen. Instead, you need liquid pumped directly onto the hardware. Now, of course, this is fabulous news for companies good at pumping liquid onto GPUs, like Vertiv, which is now more or less the NVIDIA of cooling infrastructure. And for the electrical guts, so to speak, you need switchgear and the transformers required to handle these enormous power loads. This hardware is made by firms like Eaton and Schneider Electric, which are becoming quiet monopolies, printing cash on every gigawatt deployed. Now, with all these billions being burned and gigawatts being guzzled inside the United States, you could be forgiven for forgetting that there are other countries busy scaling AI infrastructure. Not only is the US not the only country doing so, it's not even in the lead. While the US grapples with the low ceiling imposed by its decrepit 1960s power grid, pesky state planners in China just added the entire electrical capacity of France, the UK and Germany in clean, renewable energy capacity within 12 months. Don't take it from me, though. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang complained to the Center for Strategic and International Studies last month, quote, "If you want to build a data center here in the United States, it is probably about 3 years. China can build a hospital in a weekend. Apples and oranges, perhaps, but the point stands. The bottleneck isn't GPUs anymore, it's the electrical supply. And China's structural advantages don't stop at construction speed. They've also mastered ultra-high voltage transmission, technology that moves massive amounts of renewable power from the deserts in the west to AI clusters in the east with minimal loss. Their grid is unified and purpose-built for industrial scale. The American grid, meanwhile, fragmented between regional private interests like PJM and ERCOT, can't do this. Now, if the US grid places a hard ceiling over how much AI infrastructure can be built domestically, well, the hyperscalers will simply take their business somewhere else. And this is actually already underway, with capital flowing into jurisdictions with available power like Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So, don't be surprised if you see American chips and American technology increasingly deployed on foreign soil because American electricity isn't available. Washington has spent the last 3 years trying to choke China's access to advanced semiconductors. Export controls, entity lists, diplomatic pressure on allies all moving in lockstep to undermine the competition. But energy abundance offers China a workaround. If electricity is cheap and effectively unlimited, you don't even need the most efficient chips. You can brute force your way to capability using older, less efficient domestic silicon running on cheap power. Huawei's Ascend processors aren't as sophisticated as Nvidia's, but they don't need to be if you can run 10 times as many of them. So, where does all this leave us for the year ahead? Well, we think 3 things seem likely. First, America's power grid problems will get worse before they get better. The rate of new energy infrastructure addition is nowhere near keeping pace with the demand growth coming from hyperscalers. PJM is already operating without adequate reserves. Texas runs its own isolated grid with its own reliability problems. Neither system has headroom to absorb an extreme weather event while simultaneously feeding the data center boom. Sooner or later, a shock will come, and when it does, we wouldn't be surprised to see AI blackout entering the lexicon. Second, the AI trade rotates. For the past 2 years, AI investing basically meant buying Nvidia and holding on. This trade, though, is now extremely crowded, while the bottleneck has moved downstream from the GPUs to the power that runs them. Companies from semiconductor designers, utilities, fuel suppliers, and infrastructure firms have pricing power in a supply-constrained market, and money is increasingly flowing in their direction. Third, regulation accelerates. Following the examples set by Ohio and Virginia, we expect more states will introduce some measure of protection for residential ratepayers from AI-induced price spikes. Some jurisdictions might even start blocking data center construction outright to preserve grid stability. Now, none of this suggests that the AI boom is ending anytime soon. It's just becoming more expensive and contentious. The companies that thrive will be the ones that secured their power supply early, locked in long-term contracts, and built where the grid can actually support them. Everyone else gets to wait in the interconnection queue. Or, for the impatient, just start building AI infrastructure in outer space. And if you want to learn what on earth that's all about, then you should probably watch this video right over here. That's all from me for now, though. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Guy, over and out.